Welcome back to Us Creative Types, the podcast that examines creativity through conversations with the people behind the work, exploring milestones in their lives and what they've learned along the way. I'm your host, Scott Littroff. There are creatives whose work feels less like a fixed idea and more like a living process, unfolding for the audience in exciting ways. My guest today is one such artist, connecting people, cultures, histories, and technologies through music charged with deep emotion. She is a composer, producer, performer, and educator whose music exists beautifully between worlds. Drawing upon her experience growing up in Sarajevo and her life and career flourishing across multiple countries and artistic traditions, she has developed an artistic voice that resists easy categorization. Her creative path is one of artistic evolution, resilience, curiosity, and courage, all the while guided by an optimism and strong work ethic that are downright inspirational. This episode opens with an audio excerpt from her 2006 composition entitled Before and After the Tekka, appearing here from her 2014 album entitled Evolution, released under Big Round Records. It's my pleasure to share with you my conversation with Svjetlana Bukvich.
Without you, the distant foreign lands hurt more. And the empty roads. And the strange dreams that I have even when I'm awake. That I can't chase away without you.
Svjetlana Bukvich, thank you so much for being here today. It's a genuine thrill to have you here on Us Creative Types.
Well, thank you for having me. I am very excited to be here at the onset of spring, shall we say.
Oh, that's right.
Or rather the promise of spring. So it gives me something to look forward to.
For people who do not live in the tri-state area, we've been having very odd weather. We have 60s, 70s, and then 30s and 40s. So,
right.
Yeah,
unpredictable.
Unpredictable.
Itself.
That's right. Well, and that's part of what we'll be talking about, the unpredictability of life and how we deal with that artistically. I do want to start out, we are colleagues at Queensborough Community College, and I'm very happy that we are. We get to work together quite a bit. I wanted to first give a bit of a synopsis, and please fill in those blanks for me. This is just an overview that you are a composer, you are a performer. I would also call you, if I could use the term, sound architect. I think what you do really goes beyond maybe the term composer in the traditional sense because of a lot of your electroacoustic work, and I'd love for us to get into that. But please tell me if that is a good synopsis of some of what you do artistically.
It really is. And thank you for the sound architect. I had never thought of it before. I like it.
Please use it. Please use it if you like it.
When they say, that architecture is frozen sound, I immediately, when I first read that phrase, I immediately felt a kinship to it. So thank you for that. I think another word for sound architect would be producer, a music producer. But yes, working with sound is really my primary kind of calling, before I would call myself anything else. Sound architect is pretty good. I'm excited.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, now that makes me feel great. So I'd like to start by asking you, it's obvious that this is your passion, and you are someone who has taken a passion and made a career out of it. And something at Us Creative Types that I like to put forth with every guest is highlighting what it really means for someone to take a passion and turn that into a career, because that is it's a beautiful but sometimes risky and difficult and fun and everything in between kind of decision that someone makes. And I wanted to ask you that spark when you first realized, this is what I want to do with my life. Take us to that time.
Wow. Thank you. I mean, it happened very early on, and I've never looked back and never doubted the decision, no matter how hard the circumstances turned out to be over the years, and the war in the 90s in my home country, and then coming here and
In
starting.
your home country of?
I was born in Yugoslavia, and then with the country separating into several smaller countries. Now my country is called Bosnia and Herzegovina. I'm from Sarajevo, the capital, and we had the Winter Olympics in 1984.
That's right.
Which I remember fondly because of the very successful recent Winter Olympics in Italy, which were the biggest Olympics so far. But the country itself, I have to say, was a unique historic event. And the more time passes and the more I look around as an adult, the more I appreciate the kind of childhood and freedom I had there in a geographical space that didn't belong to the East nor the West, and politically likewise. So it was kind of like a little, dome that was golden and glass-like to me, experiencing it as a young person.
Do you find that, is there a way that may have manifested itself in your childhood? Any cognizance of there being this pull between East and West, neither and both, and any tension with that? Is that something that you were cognizant of?
Well, yes, that's a good question, but I wouldn't say it was a tension. It was more of a, what you know is what is normal.
I see.
So for me, for instance, the dichotomy between the uptown and the downtown music scene that I experienced here in the city when I arrived in the 90s was a new thing because in the city where I'm from, the uptown and the downtown did not exist. So, there was no tension between, highbrow, lowbrow, quote unquote, and no tension between East and West because we kind of felt secluded in that area after having kicked out the Nazis, being the first country in Europe to actually do that.
Right.
And I am proudly thinking of those times. And so I do remember, though, after I had finished my 2 degrees at the Academy of Music in Sarajevo, at the Sarajevo University, I remember sitting on top of a mountain, which is where my dad built a little kind of like mountain house. And I was kind of looking around and distinctly feeling, okay, what do I do with this knowledge that I have now? It was a conglomerate of German influences, French and Italian influences on one side, and then the Russian influences on the other. And yet, with all the, ethnic music and the richness of the meeting of the East and West, I was thinking, well, there's got to be something very unique that I'm supposed to do with all this, because I didn't feel like I belonged to the sort of Eastern school of musical training, but neither did I feel I completely belonged to the Western. And so, yes, to answer your question, there was no tension, but rather a question of what now? Where do I go? And what do I do with this that is meaningful to me? And it turned out that New York was the destination, actually, for my dreams at the time I thought to come true.
That's great. I when you said that what now moment, I love the idea of that, because whenever we get that what now moment, that's either it's a point of uncertainty in some ways, but it's those moments that, at least for me, always reminds me that our growth happens when we're out of a comfort zone, right? When you get
absolutely.
too comfortable and you get too, shall we say, confident in what you're doing in your surroundings, you have that what now moment because it's time to grow. It's time for something to happen.
Absolutely.
Did you feel like a move to New York was part of that growth for you?
Oh, 100%. My life has been changed by that decision. Well, actually, it was accepting rather the scholarship. I went to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. I was applying at the time. The school gave me full tuition, and it was the first multimedia program in the U.S. I did not quite know that part at the time, but looking at what they were offering, it seemed like, the promised land to me. It seemed like if I could only learn all that, right?
At that point, were you composing, shall we say, if I can use the phrase, more traditionally? Was it with less electronics and things like that? Or were you already immersed in this idea of electroacoustics?
Well, that's a good question. I did not have a computer. I did not know how to turn on a computer. And I was trained primarily in acoustic terms. But I was very active on the scene as a, barter person. I wanted to produce my own ideas musically. And so I would trade my keyboard chops and my, vocal chops in order to get a little time in the studio with the boys. And so that was sort of the beginning of my electronic odyssey. I was drawn to the music that fuses the two, but I didn't have the tools readily to do that. My sister is shy of 9 years older, and when she was in her teens, played me all the, Led Zeppelins, Tangerine Dreams, and, great bands, Pink Floyds, and so on, that fused electronic and acoustic music. And so for me, coming strictly from the, academic background, that was, this can be done as well.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And so I cried my eyes out to get one of the first digital synths, right? We're talking about the infamous DX7 and DX11. I got the DX7 imported from Italy, and I was the first female in town with that keyboard, which changed the game a little bit because I could gig more, I could barter more to get more studio time and so on. So with that keyboard, which I devoured, I loved it and what it could do. In addition to my piano sounds and whatever
Right, because
else.
you were already trained as a pianist.
Oh,
you
absolutely.
You had been a performing pianist for a long time by that point. Right?
Yes. Yeah. So that was my first exposure to actually programming a bit and starting to envision how the sounds from the synth could complement or rather extend what I was doing acoustically. But I didn't fully answer your first question, I believe, which is when was that first passion calling moment? And I think actually I could recall two. One was when I was about 6 and I was, again, in the mountains, where the house was. And I was swinging on a swing and I was listening to the wind and I was alone. And I strictly remember this. This was a long time ago, but it was so profound that I can go there anytime in my mind. It's such a strong memory. And I remember thinking that everything was a flow around me. And there was music and sound in that, even though I didn't hear anything around me but the wind and maybe the brook. But I heard a kind of a unity that made me feel that I wanted to give myself to it and be part of it. And I think that my whole life I'm still kind of with one ear listening to that, whether I'm compartmentalizing my life too much or giving in to more of a flow. And then another moment was when I was 4, actually earlier, when my sister, who went to music school at the time, it was possible to go to 2 schools in Yugoslavia if you were good. I wanted to do 3. I wanted to do ballet as well, but my parents
You wanted
said,
to keep it simple,
you would
right?
just
Only
die
3
if you
schools.
went to 3 full-time schools at 6. So I said, okay, then it'll be music and, regular elementary school. And so I started imitating my sister because she was already in music school and regular school. And so she showed me how to do Beethoven's Für Elise, right? And of course, I loved that piece right away, but
Right.
yes,
Yeah.
I loved even more that I could actually, with my hands that were half the size, could play. And she showed me the whole thing and I memorized it. And so she took me to her music school and she showed me to her teachers. And as I started playing, more teachers came in and more teachers came in. And I felt that I had done something important with very little effort. And I think I liked that. I thought life should be this fun, right? I felt like I could do these things with my hands and there was sound in the air, and there were these frequencies enveloping everybody, and they seemed to be joyful because of that. And that was very inspirational to me early on, thinking that I could actually move people with something that I'm doing.
See, that's something I can...
That was a switch on moment for me.
And I can relate to that so much. I think a lot of musicians and creative people can relate to that. There's something about the gratification of knowing other people are enjoying something that you're doing.
You are reaching them somehow.
Right. It's that payoff. To have that as a child is, I'm good at this.
Yeah.
I can get better at this. It doesn't seem like work, right? Because it is work, but if it doesn't feel like it, you just go to town on it, right? But that I relate to that greatly. I think a lot of people would resonate greatly with what you said about that.
Did you have a moment like that where you were young and life seemed easy and kind of connected? And
oh, everything was easy back then. Everything was easy when you didn't know anything about life. But I will say my musical journey in that regard started, my parents bought me this small little Casio keyboard. It had maybe 20, 30 keys on it. And I used it. I didn't know at the time, but I was transcribing music. I was into video games. And I loved, for those of you, shout out to the Zelda series. Ocarina of Time is one of my favorite games because all of the main characters' plot movements happen around music. You learn different themes to open doors and things. And I just kept transcribing it to the keyboard, and I did not know what I was doing. I didn't realize it. So then when I'm playing violin in elementary school and the saxophone, and people are looking and saying, wow, he's really good. I'm thinking, oh, I'm good? Well, now I get that ego boost, especially as someone who's a little closed off. I was definitely an introvert at that time. And then you see that what you're doing, like you said, what you're doing is bringing other people enjoyment, and that makes you want to do it more. We're all performers. All of us in the creative arts, we are definitely performers, even if we're people who are not necessarily on a stage.
I agree with that.
Right? We are. And I think it deeply informs the meaningfulness of what we do. So yeah, that means a lot to hear how you describe that and how you experience it, and to know that that's this through line for you.
Even people behind the console, which I am sometimes.
Of course
the music, the mixing console, are performing. And that is because there has to be intention in the equation, and that intention that manifests a certain something is present throughout human expression.
Right.
I think it has no limit.
So you are in New York, experimenting with synth, experimenting with digital in the form that it existed at that time. I wanted to ask you, how much of a boys' club did you find all that scene at that time? Because I think I think it's a fair thing for us to acknowledge, and important to acknowledge, that a lot of the music world for a long time has been a boys' club. And you alluded in some way to that you were the only woman doing this.
The reason I'm laughing is because this is a question that is not going away. And it's been kind of interesting to me to look at the percentages over the years. I started a very long time ago, and so 30 years ago, maybe the percentage of women in the U.S., though. Back home, it was minimal, close to zero, right?
Okay.
Producing and working with technology, to be more precise. But over here, I had expected a wider stage. And so then I looked at numbers, and it looked like, it was maybe 3.5%, which was more than back home. So I thought, oh, this is good.
Okay, right. But still...
But fast forward, it's now a whopping 6.8.
Oh, boy.
So it hasn't really changed that much, even though there are vast examples of how people are, moving the needle, as they say. And so it is a good thing. My take on that is one lives by teaching by example. And for me, at least, it wasn't about pointing fingers. It was, okay, that's what it is. How do we deal with this? Mm-hmm. How do we fix it? How do we show that perhaps a male and a female in a studio could yield results that haven't been seen before? Can we explore that? Okay, 50% of population on this earth are women. Okay, maybe that is a channel toward that a little more because
would
of how
think
we
so.
hear the frequencies. Maybe it's worth exploring. So I never despaired. There was no doubt that I was going to do this breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so I just kept working and, showing up and doing twice as much of work if needed to prove that I can do it. What I don't do anymore is, though, I don't schlep heavy synths, which I used to do. I'm petite, but I used to do that to show the guys that I can do it, be part of the band or whatever. And now I let them open the door and carry my gear. So, and it's fine because we're different. It's all right.
But you've also musically earned all this. I mean, you're walking into a room, knowing that you got the goods, and you've proven it.
That's true. But, when I was 16 and 17, I would be, doing keyboard work in the studio and singing backup vocals and things like that. And what I learned quickly was that I am there to do just that, as opposed to giving the guys advice on how their structure should work in a song to make it better. And so I learned quickly to compartmentalize and kind of do what I was paid to do or asked to do. And it was only later when I came here that I was able to be on a more equal footing and express myself and kind of stand behind those decisions in the studio. Because the reason I started learning production, and that's actually what drove me to come here, I thought, I need to learn how to put the bow on top of my sound, how to manifest what I hear and not have it be this tiered process where, the guy I've never met from somewhere else just comes and does the mixing and the mastering, and I'm like, wow, that's not what I want.
Right.
But even to be in the conversation, one has to have a vocabulary, not to mention some training and so on. So it kind of gradually started to improve both my skill level and how I was received. Not only by my male colleagues, but just generally, how I was received in the world. And that was very gratifying. It taught me a lesson that perseverance and hard work and passion do pay off in the end.
Look, when I listen to your music, and I've seen your music live too, and I have to mention, your live shows are a show. That's something that I really like about what you do, at least from my perspective. This was one of the shows that was presented at Queensborough Community College. We have this beautiful QPAC hall that was renovated. It's a multi-million-dollar project. I think it's one of the most beautiful halls in the city now in New York. And you had several guests. You had, which string quartet was it? Was it Ethel?
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Very celebrated string quartet. There was an electric violinist, fantastic musicians that you were working with, but there was a lot of showmanship to it. And I don't often see that. And when I saw that, I said, okay, she gets it. Because I know you were directing all of it. And I know you have that director in you too. And I wanted to know how do you see yourself in, let's say, that live setting versus recording setting? Because it was such an experience for me to see that it wasn't just about the music. It was also about the experience of being able to see it. There's an extra element for an audience when you know they can see you performing it in real time.
Oh.
And many people don't take advantage of that in the arts. So I want to know what your take on that is.
Well, thank you. I am happy that it translated in more than petite women with curly hair sitting behind screens.
No, it was so
imploded
cool.
in the process. Some of the decisions I instituted for that particular concert came from my many collaborations with choreographers. And so composing music for movement taught me about how to energize that part of a live setup when there is no dance on stage, but where musicians, if they are embodying the sound, can actually move and translate the music that much more.
You had composed for the Sarajevo Ballet, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of companies in the U.S. and a company in Korea, and they were all just fabulously welcoming, and I learned so much in the process, and that leaks into live shows when I do them without a live dance component, and so this ties to another way of thinking when I work, which is that most of the musicians I work with are, yes, classically trained, but they are fluid in genres and very receptive to new ideas. And so when I compose, I kind of know who I'm writing for and cater it a little bit toward a group or an individual performer. And so it's already in the music. So when they're on stage, they are fully there. They have not learned something 2 days ago. They have been with that for a while. And so all the musicians you saw, except for maybe one, the clarinetist, who came through an organization that I'm on the board for, and she was just so phenomenal. That's one example when I didn't where I didn't work with a person before, but all of them have had a chance to be with me in the studio or on stage before, and it's more of a rock band aesthetic than writing a piece for an ensemble that will be picked up there, and then you can't go. They don't have the funds for new music to fly you there, and then you get the video, and you go, huh?
Right.
Even though the musicians may be first rate, but it's just not an experience of having worked with them. And I always say we have the luxury nowadays to work with living composers more than ever.
Right,
and with
course.
the technology and the interconnectivity of the internet, I mean, ask questions. Let's go. Let's do it together. And it brings it up a notch invariably.
Have you started projects already having someone in mind before you write something? Like, I really want to work with this person. I'd like to write something for them. Or is it that you're starting projects and you say, who this would be perfect for so-and-so because of their skill set? Have both of those situations occurred?
Yes, and that partially has to do with the fact that in New York City, I mean, doing new music, one has to be a maverick of sorts. So one piece can be malleably transfigured into something else, and then the budget allows for that. Or one starts with an instrumentalist. In my case, it was a pop project, and then we fell in love, so we continued working in other areas that I'm involved in. And so, yes and yes. It just depends on the project and the configuration of the chessboard, because one has to manifest and it has to happen with deadlines, and the grant money is dwindling down, so we have to be super focused and super inventive. Do you know when people say artists are absent-minded? It really gets me because
I haven't heard it, but it can be true.
In my case, I mean, I'm so super focused on something throughout the day, thinking about that next step 3 days from now, that I may seem absent-minded for, what's at hand, breakfast, whatever it is. But I think artists are actually very disciplined in order to do what they do,
Well, there's also having a project in your mind, and you go about your day, and you may not be actively sitting down and writing, or you may not be at the keyboard, but you're still working on the project.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes it happens organically. And I understand that feeling of, wow, I forgot that my phone was in my hand the whole time and I'm looking for it for 10 minutes, which all of us do anyway. Everybody in the world does that, right? It's like the yawn of our generation is, where's my phone? But the reason why those things might happen for us is because we're still brainstorming, or we're writing, or we're producing. We're actually in that artistic activity throughout the day.
That's
and we
right.
can't turn it off.
We can't turn it off. And that's a good thing because then we are more efficient in the studio or where it needs to be manifested. I've heard my colleagues and family members say, well, but you don't really sit in the studio much and sort of play and dilly-dally. And the answer is no, I don't. When I'm there, it's Technicolor, baby. It's all engines up, and the preparation that went on, for days or sometimes weeks, then gets to be fully implemented. And it doesn't look like play. It looks like boom, 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 boom. It's very frantic and active and beautiful and fun.
What you had explained earlier about your part of your motivation to learn production and to be in control of your own production, that's something that resonates with me. I'm in no way the kind of production expert that you are. I wouldn't use the word expert to describe what I do with that. But having more skills now in the last few years in the area of production than I previously did, even just going into a studio as a recording artist, which is normally when I'm in a studio, I'm being recorded and someone else is engineering for me, to understand if I can give a product in this way in front of the microphone, it's more likely that we'll get what we want in post.
That's
and
right.
Understanding things like the best way to have good post-production is to have good production.
Absolutely.
It sounds very simple, but I don't think it's as simple as people think it is. You have a lot of musicians, especially acoustic musicians, and any acoustic musicians out there, I am your friend. It's not a bad thing to say, but sometimes we go into the studio and we're so in our heads. We've been working with sheet music, or we've been listening to reference tracks or reference recordings, and we go in and we have some kind of super artistic idea of what we're going to do. But being in a studio is a different environment than being on a stage, and you have to channel that energy differently.
Yes,
and to
absolutely.
know, how does the producer do their job? I'm still in awe of it.
And sound mixers and engineers are cranky. They don't
funny.
want to be talked to over their shoulder. So you learn that too.
I must have been very
and I am one
fortunate.
of them too. So like, it's interchangeable. But don't you think that we are entering into this, part of the conversation about flow, I hope, because you are experiencing that the more you know about the production process, even though you may not be over there behind this glass panel, you will be intuiting what's going on over there. You'll be embodying what they're receiving and how then best to, by all of you, create something because you know the vocabulary, because you know how to address, because you have studio skills and you know when to speak, when not to speak. And so I think it's all a beautiful thing. And I would encourage, and it's happening, with schools and in programs. I think we are more and more pumping out instrumentalists that have some idea of what goes on in the studio, and I think it is a good thing. But the thing I do encounter as a professor is that speaking of that kind of mental capacity to be with the music throughout the day and then manifest quickly maybe when you're in the studio, when one is in the studio. I grew up with no technology. And so I was forced to imagine, and I had to come up with orchestral ideas in my head, whether at the piano or not. And so I still trust myself in that way, and I can do it in my head. And what I'm seeing a bit, we cannot, I think, let ourselves be completely doing everything outside of our heads, right? And hitting play and seeing how it comes back. It has to be a more integrated process. And the best of AI is going to do that on a different level, I believe. I'm not one who is afraid of technology. I may be against some of the ways in which corporations are handling the ownership of AI. But AI itself is not it's not the threat. I think it is those who own it and what they do with it. And that's why I also think younger generations should insert themselves into the matrix of technology in order not to be overpowered down the road.
Right.
Right. Because we need to be not passive.
What are your feelings about that ownership issue with AI being in the mix now? You mentioned that you have specific feelings about how, the ownership of one's ideas and the insertion of AI, because it's a topic that's, I think, on all our minds. And in the creative world, it's something that's made people feel very, very tense about. I'm curious what your feelings about that are.
Well, I was intrigued by it early on and asked up the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers that I belong to, both as a composer and publisher, put together panel in 2019, right before COVID, about artificial intelligence and music. And I ran to it. It was in New York, so I could get to it. And the hall was packed. Everybody wanted to be informed. And the then president of ASCAP, with a panicked voice, imparted that we should absolutely be studying copyright law, seeing what is changing daily, and that we should not be left out as authors in this game of who's going to own your mind. And so I took it to heart and was doing some research by myself, and came to the conclusion that AI is developing based on what it's learning from us. Those models have been pretty consistent, showing that, if you have an intelligent conversationalist like yourself, we are to hope that our interaction will be that much more meaningful, elevated,
Right.
full of things that are useful, challenge our memory, challenge everything we can do with sound, how to embody it. It is a very fast highway to some of the greatest mysteries that we can even think about in the universe and beyond. Black holes and all that. I mean, what's happening with quantum physics lately has been hugely exciting. So far, I stand by, if I am a better player, my AI game will be better. And then I need to know who's owning the AI and what they're doing with what I'm contributing to it.
Right. That's the crux of the matter in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Legally speaking, anyway.
And so, but, think of any new technology. Think of Napster, the whole $1 billion
right.
lawsuit that came out of that.
The Metallica lawsuit and everything came from that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And with any defining new technology, like at that time MP3 was, one experience is a bit of a, as I said before, a gray area where things are legally and otherwise starting to form, and there will be those, just like kids, see how far they can go, and some will get rich and not be challenged with how they got there if it was illegal, and some will be challenged. So my formative years, the Yugoslavia experience, so to speak, showed for a very brief period of time, some 45 years or so, that it is possible to be self-sustaining, to live in peace with people of different religious orientations and philosophical orientations, to be honoring others, and to be prosperous. Yugoslavia was hugely prosperous during its time. And just that feeling of, it's possible and we're doing well, I will never forget. I'd rather us believe in it as an opportunity rather than, it's an experiment, didn't work. But the ideas that did work for a while should be the leading light, both in this country, what did work, what was good, what the world loved about the US, what opportunities were here that weren't possible before, and what kind of language of cooperation and prosperity, the new world, right? That's what brought me here, still exists. And if we focus on that, perhaps there is some hope. So that's a long-winded answer.
No,
about
please,
AI.
no, that's wonderful. No, because, but it's such a complicated subject. I think that our field of having taken our passion and putting food on the table with it, first of all, makes us think about our work a little bit differently, because we are our own product, which itself comes with it this entire psychological kind of hula hoops that you have to jump through in order to be able to manage all of it.
Right.
But then there's also the difficulty of knowing that life is happening all around us and we're responding to it. And it's kind of like this observer effect kind of thing. We can't act like we're outside of it.
Yeah.
I think there are artists that do act like they're outside of it, but it all affects us, and we're living in a nation, wherever you are and things are happening, your artistic output will reflect how you're feeling about it. It'll affect, and I don't think people should shy away from allowing their convictions and their opinions to be part of it. I think sometimes people may be worried, well, maybe a potential viewer or listener won't like. Well, I mean, but be true to yourself, though, because at some point you have to be true to yourself. I have that cautious optimism in some ways, but I also hope that at some point people can wake up and say there are certain aspects of the way that we act as a culture that needs to be excised from our culture that inexplicably try to push people down for no reason. Because at the end of the day, like you said, that Yugoslavia was prosperous. And when you were in New York, it was around 1992? Was that when the war started?
Yeah, when the war started.
How did that affect you, the war starting when you were here? You weren't home when that happened.
Well, I was there for a couple of months.
Oh, okay.
The war started out in April, and I remember being able to come to do graduate school here in September. So those couple of months were, shelling. I experienced shelling of the city, and no electricity, no water, telephone.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Wires were down, and the bank accounts were emptied. So it had started, but in my wildest imagination, I could not have predicted 4 years of bloodshed. So how did that affect me? I came riding on the, supersonic wave of the 80s. Sarajevo, at that time, when I was in my teens and growing up, was a hip place where everybody wanted to come. People collaborated, all the arts. We worked with Belgrade, Zagreb, Ljubljana, Skopje, and part of the Europe. And so I had that in me. And when I came to the city, the vibe here in the 90s was very similar. I saw people collaborating, really, going for what they had to express without fear. I saw courage. I loved that. And so it kind of fit like a glove. I was just, boom, I was there. And I didn't dwell on the war, even though I started by watching, CNN day and night. And I started to feel nuts. So I had to throw the TV out of my little place upstate while I was going to school. And I dove into reading manuals and getting my tech game on because I knew that would help me stay sane. And so in that way, I tried to channel it into something useful and positive because I had this feeling that down the road, I will be useful with this new knowledge and what I bring from where I'm from and kind of creating this new thing in the future for me, thinking, wow, this is useful. If I dwell in the negative, I will just go down. And I couldn't allow that to happen.
Wow. Taking a very heavy situation, knowing that loved ones and
yes, my whole family
and your home and everything that you know is in so much jeopardy and danger, and finding a way to move forward and try to channel it in a way that was as healthy as it can be. That's
well, my heart,
tough.
goes out right now to everyone who is suffering. And when the towers fell in the city, of course, the memories of Sarajevo came back. And also, my father passed in Sarajevo that same day. So 9/11 was very difficult for me. I think that was sort of the most challenging day of my life. Not the leaving of the city, on the bottom of the bus with bullets flying around. That didn't seem that difficult compared to here, 9/11, because I knew the world was going to become a very complicated place, number one. And on a personal level, losing my dad, whom I adored, was very difficult. So I take that day and then see how I rebuilt myself from that moment on and how difficult it was, but at the same time, one has the capacity to look at what came before and take strength from it rather than weeping and then take that and move forward in any best way we know how. And so, as difficult as it is right now, those are my experiences as somebody who had been through difficult times, and there is a way forward as long as we breathe.
I know, thriving versus surviving, it's tough, right?
Yeah.
The difference between the two can be very thin, right? That wall between thriving and surviving
absolutely.
is almost the same.
We're not
sometimes.
impervious to the ups and downs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think dovetailing from what we're just talking about, can you think of any projects? I know it's kind of like, asking about projects that you've done. You've done a lot of work. You have a lot of musical output, and, you've done a lot. But any projects that you felt specifically came out of an effort to want to thrive instead of survive?
Yes. And the thing I always ponder about is that I seem to personally lead a fairly conservative life, but when I look at my music, it's anything but. And so my wild side and my ideas about the future, I put in the work. So in that regard, my work from 2006 called Before and After the Decade, and I believe you might have heard actually a piece of it. I did some of it.
Actually, we can link that as well. Was that same performance? Was it, or maybe a different one? The link that you provided.
No, it was a different one.
Okay.
But that was a landmark piece for me. That came out of feeling that I have finally started to liberate myself and live fully and claim who I am with the ideas that I had, and so. The crux of the piece is an amplified violin and a Moog synthesizer. So they kind of talk and walk in parallel. And there is quite a bit of microtonal tuning of my own design. Mm-hmm. And the electronic parts I played myself. And produced everything. So that piece really was, okay, that is really exactly what I wanted to say at the time I wanted to say it. And it kind of sublimated a lot for me. And it opened a lot of doors for me. So again, lesson learned. I didn't conform and I went for it. And next thing I'm in China, at a Congress of International Women in Music doing that piece with my violinist. That's here awesome. From New York and different other things.
That was a very powerful piece to watch, too. There's improvisation in that piece as well, right? There's a lot of improvisational back and forth, or is it more of an interpretation of the directions that you provide musicians?
I love that you would see it in that way, because there is absolutely no improvisation in the piece.
That's so surprising, but
yeah,
please explain, though.
Everything
please
is written out for the violin part, including the microtones.
Wow.
And the electronic background is fixed, and so that is a compliment because
sounded very fluid, very fluid.
I have, done a bunch of schooling that now I'm dropping to the ground and trying to get into a little bit more of improvisation.
Okay.
As classically trained musicians, we don't get that freedom. I did it through rock and roll and, my interest in the new wave and early electronic experimental music, right? In the U.S., John Cage and the Indeterminists and that whole scene in the 60s and the 70s in New York deeply interested me. But I didn't really improvise as a pianist. I was playing Beethoven concertos with an orchestra, so you play what's on the page. So I'm glad that you see that as maybe somewhat transitional, that it's written music that sounds fluid and improvisational at times and conversational. And now I'm, looking to work with musicians that can also improvise well under guided perimeters, perhaps at first, getting my feet wet a little bit, and then moving more into that with composed or fully composed sound. So yeah, thank you for that. That's really fun.
Yeah, that was the performance that I watched of that piece. What was the name of that piece? It was Before and After.
The Teke. Teke is a form. It's a word. It's an English word. I looked far and wide for it. For a dervish monastery.
Oh, I see.
And the piece was about my experience of going back to my the land of my ancestors, which is actually Herzegovina, and finding a 17th century teke that is a museum now. But going there, it's teeny at the foot of a mountain, glorious green, clean water comes out of it. And, coming from the hustle and the bustle of New York, I was taken by my experience in and around this little teke. So hence before and after. And then the whole piece became, about the sounds of New York City and what I was doing here. And that's sort of like the ancient call of the land. And so it was done based on a memory, basically.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I found that fluidity, that sound of fluidity in your music in general. And it was possibly because of my background in improvisational music. I'm feeling, there's got to be some improvisation. But that's so interesting that the directions were provided. But that's also a credit to the way in which you compose the music, represent it, and work with your musicians, that it comes out so fluid, because we know that no matter what we do, it's a roadmap. It's so hard for us to show every little thing that we want. And that kind of auteur style of composition, we try to control as much as we can, and then we still don't know how it's going to come out.
I know. Believe me, that's the challenge I face every day. But that piece in particular was when I was actually starting to drop the weight of all of the music education, including a degree in musicology and a very strong ethnomusicology department when I was studying back home, and then all the new stuff I was doing in the U.S. And I, with that piece, wanted to reach deep into what I think flow of life might look like for me, and try to express it, and close my eyes to all the rules and all the school stuff about structures and all that, and came up with my own kind of women's journey, freedom call, wild ride thingy, right? And so I was in my 40s, and I realized, okay, this has to be a new frontier, because, again, going back to that swing back home in the mountains, there is a sense of flow and fluidity. If you can recall your childhood, think about it. There was no compartmentalization, really. I mean, everything was, I use that word, technicolor. Everything was feeding, coming out of one another, family growing, new information, nature, smells, animals, whatever it is. But it was one unlimited and not very labor-inducive journey.
We haven't experienced enough to start compartmentalizing, I think, which is a nice thing, right? We experience things naturally, and we respond in a very natural way, and we're not generally, least if we are self-conscious, not as much as we will be in adulthood.
And then I went to school to just finish this thought. 2 schools all the time, but 2 full-time schools, not just having piano lessons here and there. This was choir, theory, in the music school, and then elementary school. So I was in school all day practically for many years, and then at the university, a high school, music school, and regular school, high school, and then university, 2 degrees. And so it was just a lot. And I thought, where did I lose the flow? I want it back. And I consciously started working on that, because it will not come naturally. One has to, I think, consciously want to have that be part of one's life.
It gets stomped out of us.
Especially musically. Yeah.
It does.
It's sort of like we get vaccinated against it or something.
We do. And I can relate to that. I value very much the education that I've had. I was born in the mid-'80s. And so when I was a kid, everything was 90s culture, and that was my musically formative years in some ways. The pop music that I heard, but I was listening to a lot of traditional jazz, and it was all formal education. It was way past the days where jazz musicians would usually learn by just going to a club because it had been institutionalized by that point.
Right.
And I realize how that sounds saying that, but maybe the entendre is meant to be that way, because from undergraduate studies through a doctorate, just in school the whole time. And I think it was really after that was all over that I really started to learn how to be an expressive musician, because you're siloed, you're sequestered from the world in some ways. It's false, right? Because we are still part of the world, but then when you're in an academy, you have to be able to negotiate between that environment of, I'm in the practice room and I go to class and I do that routine, and it is kind of monastic. You mentioned things of that nature, and it is monastic, but then you go back into the world and, okay, now I have to find a way to be a person. I never had the opportunity to just see, well, how would I do any of this?
Right.
Because you're told what's right, you're told what's wrong. By definition, it has to be. And
but then the freedom is that much sweeter, right? That much
of course
sweet,
it is, right.
Because we have had it and we lost it, and it's kind of like gaining it again with a new perspective. Anything that we've ever learned is not really lost. It just may be pushed, to the other lobes. And then it informs things, but it is not the upfront, thing that drives things anymore. And that's a very nice thing to experience. I tell my students, you have to learn history so that you can know what you're dropping to the ground if you wish to do so, but you got nothing to drop if you don't know anything. So it's like,
right, of course.
So that's, I think, kind of like a trajectory that is not a bad one to learn a lot and then find a way how to find your own voice and all that, and the quintessential, right? What do I do after school? Maybe, but it is a beautiful thing to go through those phases, I think.
And being that we are educators, knowing that we've both had in our own way some commonality, of experience in discovering how much we can be ourselves when we're outside of that, and then being in an environment where we know we're teaching.
Yes.
And in so many ways, we can't ever truly simulate the way we learned in a classroom with students, because we have this plethora of experience that came together to form who we are. And now we're supposed to just shove that into someone's brain. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And
that's very honest and perceptive of you, because I think of teaching in the same way. Kindness and compassion are paramount, because shoving down one's knowledge and experience down the students' throats is a dangerous and slippery slope. But opening doors, however, and being humble and helping them find that what it is that they're seeking is thrilling. That part of teaching,
right.
Really love, and then seeing how they, get their wings and
right, of course,
and fly.
Now that's gratifying, especially seeing. We get to work with students who are, generally speaking, sometimes we'll have students who are quite advanced, but generally speaking, they're at the beginning of their journey in many respects. And I think that can be an exciting time, working with someone in their creatively formative years. So many things that we take for granted they've never experienced, but we know that we're helping them discover. It's all about discovering. Research means discovery. Classrooms mean discovery. Everything's about discovery. I try to. You don't have to have some kind of, I discovered a new mode of being. You don't have to do that.
It's getting them into the routine of thinking.
Exactly.
And having the discipline to engage one's brain. And that is something that, if imparted on early, will serve them for the rest of their lives. And the technology will change, the knowledge will get expanded, all that will change. But that, as they say, the integrity of a person, right, which you instill as a teacher, I think is invaluable. I also have the experience of being a parent, so there are parallels for sure. And I heard a saying somewhere that really resonated with me, which says something, I'm paraphrasing. We think we know what to teach our children, and we want to impart ourselves onto them, but they are of another time. And that is really a beautiful thing to be reminded of. We do the best we can, but they have their own lives and their own trajectories and their own thoughts. And I can't even think what my son will be dealing with 30 years from now. It's like, it is a different time. And we kind of just equip them with the tools they need to fly, but we cannot give them the knowledge, really.
Right. Something that deeply interests me, and this is something that I've asked every guest on Us Creative Types, and now I will ask you as well, is having so much experience in your career, but still exploring and still discovering, knowing that there are others who are very interested in the same field. And we just spoke of people in their formative educational years, our students, people who would like to take a similar passion and be in the creative arts, or more specifically in the area of the arts in which you reside. What advice would you have for people who desire to be in composing and performing and producing, something that you feel would be useful for them going forward?
Well, things are changing and times are changing. So when it comes to, what I do technology or musically, I would not give advice on that. But when it comes to one's life's arc, I think living a life that is not with a purpose is a tragedy. Living a life that is not full of peak memories is a tragedy. I mean, we all go to the bathroom, eat, have family interaction, school, work, whatever it is. But these experiences are kind of like here, right? But if one does a life with passion, there will be peak experiences. So like there's a gray matter, and then all of a sudden, there's a wave that is a peak light, reflects off the foam on the top. And so it's worth fighting for that kind of life, because those are the only experiences and memories that in the end really matter, whether it be in love or in art or anywhere, that we exist, all the dimensions. And then, I don't know, I think just doing art is political. It's a statement. And so, I don't think it's possible really to do art that is completely outside one's time and the experiences of one's time. Unless we are blindfolded and, cover our ears 24/7, which is never the case, we are the product of the experience of life now. Right. And so that should not be stultified. I think artists should be open to what the time is telling them. And through their prism, it's a statement to do something. Do something rather than not. And maybe your life will have that much more purpose. That would be my advice. And is it easy? No. Is it challenging? Yes.
But very worthwhile if you can attain that.
Yeah, and especially for women in my field, they come to me and say, it seems so hard, no health insurance, long hours in the studio, the boys' club looming always, this and that, no equal pay in some cases. And I just nod and say, yes, that's all true. But if you really can't live without it, it won't stop you. And so the question is to decide what the passion really is, right? That's the old saying, find what moves you. I had fortunate situations to have kind of like tasted that early on, so I didn't have to kind of think too much about it. But for those who don't, I think the idea is to get out of the comfort zone, try out different things, because then one of them just might click and be that ignition.
Right.
Otherwise, if one is in the box and always stays in the box, that will be the box.
Right. Yeah, we don't know unless we go out. I absolutely agree.
Travel is fantastic for that. I would say if all our young people on this planet could go to another culture for a year or 6 months when they're 17, 18, we'd have no problems.
Right.
But we don't know enough about each other.
I wholeheartedly agree. We need to understand each other much better.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And young people are so fabulous with their capacity for learning and their optimism and their open heart. They're fabulous ambassadors for creating a better future if we give them those experiences, I think.
Absolutely wonderful. Svjetlana, this has been a genuine thrill having you here. It's wonderful fun. We've had conversations before, but we never had the time to really sit down and get into it. And it was, I have to say, it was a very selfish treat for myself inviting you here so we could finally have a conversation about these things. But truly inspiring to talk to you about all of this.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time you gave me and this opportunity much better than talking about assessment in hallways of a college where we teach. And by the way, you're so much better at it anyways. So not that I don't have fond memories of it, but I think I prefer this.
Oh, well, point taken. And honestly, this is a much more enjoyable interaction. All right. All right. So this is so this is the segment. This is the questions from the producer.
The surprise questions.
My lovely wife and producer, Carol, who is off camera.
She is lovely.
She certainly is. Has some questions, and I would like to ask you those
that
questions
are not so
now.
lovely.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun,
Let's
dun.
see. Okay. So I'll read all of this here. So the first one, it sounds like learning production was the moment you stopped interpreting your ideas and started fully owning them. Do you think professionally that artists need that level of technical control to fully realize what they imagine?
Yes. That's the short answer. I think everybody should learn something about the incredibly imaginative world of electronic waves traveling through the universe and somehow be cognizant of them, even if one will be singing opera and not engaging with that. But I think the experience of life now and in the kind of technological matrix that we live in can only inform an opera singer to do a better job than not, right? So no matter what the trajectory is, I would say, if not engaging, in a tactile way, maybe through listening and being open to different types of music that stimulate that part of the brain.
Wonderful. I wholeheartedly agree.
Yes.
Wonderful. You'd still be right if I didn't agree, but okay. So this is.
Well, look at you. You're a prime example. You just I see the aura. You just growing and glowing and just.
Oh, that's because
branches coming out of your
I
head.
should go on a diet. That's the reason why. That's primarily the reason, but that's another story. So, so this is a question based on from when we were speaking about AI. How do you teach students to balance using technology with still developing that internal musical imagination?
Thank you. Well, she's been, Carol, you've been
It's why she's the producer. It's why she gets the big bucks.
carefully. Well, it's a balance. I mean, balance is a mantra of my life. As a creative person, one tends to think in extremes, right? So in order to function in life and manifest the work, one has to be balanced. And so I try to apply that in my teaching as well and bring enough technology in with quote unquote ear training or however I deem it necessary that they develop trusting their inner mind with music, with sound. And so as they are, as you pointed out, just starting out, it's actually a good platform to do that, say being in the first year of learning technology, because invariably I have found that those first ideas with technology are brilliant. And I tell the students to save them, to keep them, because they are shy and they want to delete something and everything if it's not,
Oh, God,
a Drake production
they want to do
right
it all
away.
the time. Yeah.
And so they would start from scratch and so on. And I try to encourage them to save everything that they've done, because 10 years from now, they may look at those gems and say, this is great. This is so fresh. This is so intuitive with technology. When one is starting, it's just a blank tabula rasa, right? So in that sense, I am grateful to be there at that level to instill that sense of adventure, and also not looking at AI or technology in general as an enemy, right?
Right. It can be a tool.
It's a tool, and if it doesn't sound right, it's not the technology's fault. We drive the ship kind of thing. So yeah, that would be my answer. I think it's a balance of the two. And for those who are lucky to be at the onset of, students' journey in that sense, it's a great place to be, because we can instill that passion and the combo of the two that will serve them well, hopefully, for a long time.
Absolutely. So this question relates to the conflict in former Yugoslavia now. That decision to channel everything into learning and creating seems to have become a defining part of who you are as an artist. Question is, do you feel like your work still carries that instinct to transform difficult realities into something constructive?
Absolutely. All the time. I feel like I am picking up the pieces and, creating a new vase out of it. That will hopefully stimulate someone's mind in a new way. And that's not a bad thing, because we are, developing new synapses and new dendrites, and who knows where that will lead us. So yes, I think there is a sense of history in my work, but also the thirst to invent new languages that will be stimulating. And we're not talking, as they say for new music, cats fighting in a bag. We are talking about music that one can listen to and in full focus perhaps get something more out of it than background music while washing dishes or something. Not to say that everybody listens like that, but you know what I mean. It is kind of like a focused thing for the best experience. Well, have good headphones. Give yourself into it and have an attention span that's more than 30 seconds, right? So we're working on all that.
Right.
At least in my music, I try to.
Wonderful. Well,
go full in.
You're certainly doing it in spades. It sounds wonderful. I love your music. And this last question, this is about your teaching. We're constantly evolving, and I imagine your teaching has evolved as well. How has becoming a parent changed the way you approach teaching?
Well, I speaking of QCC per se, I was a parent already. I became a parent while at NYU and Pratt Institute, kind of running around several institutions and, not getting my head cut off. But the later years of my son's life, I have one son, his name is Jade, have kind of coincided with my starting work at Queensborough. And so, yes, there have been plenty of parallels. I think selfishly that I have benefited from his playlists that he would share in the car or at home. And then I would appear more knowledgeable, in front of my students. But this is a professional deformation, At the same time, in the car, we would, let's listen to this bass line. And, so here I have like a 17-year-old in the car. He can't even enjoy his tunes. Mom had to dissect with him, right? But now he thanks me for it. And so not just the playlists, I have to think of just the experience of seeing life through fresh eyes, which our students starting, at 18 or 19 still possess. And that is very exciting because, as you said, discovery is there to be theirs. And I, if anything, want to encourage that rather than implement a canon that can be, not wide enough. Our students learn in different ways. And especially when it comes to music, it's hard to put in formula, right, for how they all learn differently. They are all hear differently. So, yes, being a parent has influenced my teaching in a positive way. I also am thinking sometimes about their home life. What is it that they're getting or not getting? How I can be helpful in assessing how they could be better there as well, how they can show up for their life at home better. Because if it's not the environment where they can thrive, then it's extra hard for them. They need to invent tools to lift themselves up and still then repair the family, come home and be, learning and be a good student. So,
Right.
So I think that kind of like a little bit of an understanding of what a home dynamic or intuiting what a home dynamic may be has helped me being able to offer them more or somehow be more useful.
And that's just being empathetic, which is, I agree with you 100%. So I know we feel this way about it, but not everyone is empathetic. And I think more teachers should be. If you have that empathy, it doesn't take much effort to be so, but you don't know what's going on in someone's life.
I always
all the
say
distractions
talk to them,
and everything happening. Yeah,
talk to them. And they are more often than not grateful that there's somebody who pays attention, who wants to find out more. And often they don't have anybody but their parents, really, or immediate family to run ideas against or get validation or advice. So I think teaching is more than teaching facts. It's really, for me, it's holistic, seeing the whole person and how can they then leave school and be the best version of themselves for the long trajectory of their lives. And, that is inspiring to me. I don't take that lightly.
Absolutely. It's the best way to be. I mean, it's the way to serve students well. It's absolutely.
And I think also having been for 18 years, I was at NYU. I was in music technology there, and then Pratt Institute. I was in the animation department. I was teaching animators how to do sound, and both ecosystems are very specific. And that has absolutely helped me with what I do at QCC, because it was different. So I'm looking at, this is how this works. This is how this works, and kind of then bringing the golden middle. I think that would be the resultant, model of teaching for me. I think is
right.
Sort of like having catered to both types of students. It's an ongoing kind of discovery, and when I get in a rut, I try to not take myself too seriously because
that's good advice.
Because the new day will be different, and change is the only constant. And so, yeah, that would be the mantra, I guess.
Certainly
I go by.
Is. That's right. Once again, thank you so much. This was truly inspirational to be able to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much for being a guest on Us Creative Types. Svjetlana Bukvich, thanks again.
Thank you, Scott. And you are such a wonderful person to have across the table here, and to see the glint in your eye at the end of this interview is an inspiration to me. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Us Creative Types. Us Creative Types, the podcast, is hosted by Scott Littroff and is produced, directed, and edited by Carol and Scott Littroff. Music by Scott Littroff. Artwork by Carol Littroff. And a very special thanks to our guest. Us Creative Types is available on YouTube and on all major podcast platforms. Follow, subscribe, like, and connect with us on social media. New episodes are published weekly. Until next time, stay curious and stay creative.